Hi there, my name is Owain Smolović Jones. I'm the Director of the Research into Employment, Empowerment and the Future of Work, Academic Centre of Excellence at the Open University Business School. I'm just doing this video so I can give you a quick update about how we are responding to the crisis currently engulfing the country, but also the world, the COVID-19 crisis. I'll come on to some of the bigger picture stuff at the end, but for now there's a couple of our members of academic staff who are doing really important work to respond to the crisis and showing that we can be really relevant in these times. So first of all, our human resource expert, Christina Adamas, is currently doing a cross-national study on people's attitudes to ill health and risk in these times. So she is trying to understand the public's attitudes to ill health, perceptions of risk, and self-efficacy. And she thinks that this research will give us some clues about how people's attitudes towards the future and self-efficacy can help inform perhaps how we know about their ability to protect their own health and well-being, and perhaps the health and well-being of others inside their organisations if they're in management positions. Secondly, our colleague Lia Tompkins, who's got a great history of writing on leadership and care, is about to publish a paper in the journal Leadership, which is a kind of leading questions paper, which are sort of special papers geared towards important issues of our times. And the question she's asking is, in times of crisis such as these, what should leaders and organisations do differently to discharge their duty of care? And why does it matter that leaders show up in a crisis? So leaders might not do a great deal, but they show up. And so they have a kind of symbolic value, if you like, for people who want reassurance. But I suppose leaders also, as we've seen in the UK, offer a kind of symbolic screen against which people can throw lots of their anxieties, anger, those kinds of things. So she considers the challenges for compassionate leaders in particular, including how much pain and stress they should and can absorb, because we know that from lots of studies of leadership actually that part of the function of being a leader is absorbing the anxieties, emotions and what have you of other people in organisations, and those tendencies might be magnified in times of crisis like these. And she also asks some interesting questions around issues of self-care in a context where we, I suppose, in many ways experience less control over how much self-care we can offer. I mean, from my perspective, I guess I'm relatively, in inverted commas, lucky at the moment. I don't have to go out until I need to buy grocery shopping. I don't have any caring responsibilities at the moment, apart from my little dog who's lying down next to me here. But I suppose we also need to think about frontline health and care workers, and we need to think about people on more precarious contracts, such as cleaners, for example, who don't have much choice but to go into work at the moment. And they must feel, as well as the terrible material risk combined very often with low pay they're experiencing, they must feel a huge amount of loss of control in these times when they can't really control to a huge extent whether they get this virus or not. For the rest of us, things are a little better, of course. We can control things. So let's think about a bit sort of bigger picture then at some of the other work going on in the centre and how I think that's relevant to this crisis. So most obviously, and touching on what I just said about gig economy and precarious work, we've got a lot of that research going on in our centre. So Jamie Woodcock, who's written some fabulous books on the gig economy and done some fabulous studies of call centres and courier drivers and so on and so forth. He works in close partnership with the International Workers of Great Britain, the IWGB workers, who, like many trade unions across the country and the world, have kind of been inundated with horror stories really of workers being unfairly laid off or their terms and conditions being reduced at virtually no notice. And so Jamie's been staying in touch in a very practical way with the union, but I'm sure some very interesting research will come out of this the other side as well. And so I'm involved in a project with Lia Smolović Jones and Caroline Clark, which looks in particular at hospitality workers who are also class themselves as precarious workers, particularly those who've taken strike action. And we know as well that the unions we were working with in our research are having a very busy time of it at the moment, because there's so many erosions of people's terms and conditions they need to protect. But there have also been some wins. So the Wetherspoons workers, which is one of the group we were looking at, have managed to at least get 80% of their salary, but only after a huge social media and public campaign. They're pressing now for 100%, so let's see what happens. So, but in times like this, we also need to think about the fact that people's material conditions stretch beyond the workplace into the home. And so we know that the private tenancy trade union, for example, Acorn, is also extremely busy at the moment fighting unfair evictions of people who've been told to just get out of their homes in this time where, where are you supposed to go? And particularly in a time of crisis, it feels like especially important work. A couple of things, I guess, are possible because of this crisis. One, which maybe is more likely, to be honest, which is that current social and political patterns and economic patterns, rather those that were in existence before this crisis, kind of continue and intensify afterwards. Normality is restored, so to speak. The other possibility is that this somehow opens up an imaginary in the public, that people start to reconceptualize, well, what is value, what is important, and by extension, what is valuable work. And this, I think, would be an interesting reckoning. So it turns out maybe that in a crisis, we don't need as many, I can be careful here I don't mean to denigrate any particular profession, but maybe we don't need as many hedge funders, digital marketers, maybe even some academics like me. But it turns out what we do need are people like cleaners, carers, health workers. And if society perhaps can come to a position where these people are more valued than they are at the moment, bin collectors as well, for example, then we might come out of this in a slightly more empowered way, emancipatory way afterwards. And in that spirit, Jo Brewis, who's our head of department, and a wonderful academic who studies gender issues, she is continuing her work on menopause at work. So again, maybe menopause might not seem directly relevant to this crisis, but it's a kind of injustice that many women live with daily in work, that they don't have the proper support or flexibility at work to continue through a very difficult period in their health. And again, so crises like this can have a funny effect on the social imaginary. They can provoke changes and rethinking of what's important at work and the care we need to provide one another at work. And finally, in the bigger picture still, there's a couple of us in the centre who are working on a project related to environmental activism and how you transition justly to a green economy. And we're particularly interested in parts of the country that are currently experiencing multiple levels of deprivation, and how green economies can be a kind of lever to regenerate and generate well-being in those communities. So the big problem with environmentalism and transition to a green economy has been, up until now, a lack of, I guess, collective will in politics, business and society to really grasp this as a systemic challenge that will need a kind of rethinking of the kind of societies and organisations we live in. And so big crises like these tend to force a kind of reckoning, or they can force a kind of reckoning. So you think about, of course, loss of life was on a much bigger scale, thankfully. The Second World War, for example, led, at least in the UK, to the creation of the welfare state, National Health Service, and so on. You can draw the line pretty cleanly. So the question is, will this crisis sort of result in a bigger rethinking of how people view their relation to their place, to the earth, to nature, and their footprint in that, and how they want to lead their lives. So that is an ongoing question. My hope would be obviously that we do, but time will tell. For now, take care of each other, and I hope you engage with our research. You can find it all on our academic pages and through our open research database, and take care of one another. Bye-bye.